Jason.
Hello, I'm Malachi, and this is our argument to why slaves should not be represented in the government.
Slavery can be traced back to 10,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, where the slaves were public workers who built structures for their rulers. The slaves themselves were war captives and prisoners, but American slavery started back in 1619 when Dutch brought African slaves to Jamestown. In 1787, large states argued that the slave population should not be represented, but the South argued they should to increase representation in government.
Slaves should not be represented due to their lack of knowledge of how to read and write, especially when they are property, really, because property has no rights in the first place. Slaves are impossible to be represented in government, and here's our proof to as why.
First of all, slaves cannot be represented due to them being property. According to measuringworth.com, slaves were sold at a very high price. As a slave in the 1700s, you could be priced based on many factors, including age, health, gender, or skill. It would be a lot of money for a healthy adult, which could have been in the hundreds or even thousands, which is bought using the money of a slave owner. That pretty much proves their property if they are bought with a lot of money.
So, slaves could become more represented in government if they actually become citizens. With citizenship, you can have a lot of rights. You wouldn't need the three-fifths compromise if you just become an actual citizen. You probably would rather be a full citizen than three-fifths of a citizen.
The movement of slaves during that time was complicated. Because the slaves were sold in markets and they could have been shipped in many portions at a time to a wealthy slave owner, buying them in a different state, and if many wealthy people did this, then the slave population would have shifted considerably, which could have shifted the representation.
Another reason as of why is slaves should not be represented is because the South shouldn't have too much representation, and we actually have reasons to is why they shouldn't have representation too. The slave was a moneymaker in the United States and still is today because of the tobacco and cotton farms and how the slaves helped boosted the economy by doing most of the work. And this can be shown in modern days with like tobacco companies such as Winston and Marlboro and Salem, which are made in actually North Carolina themselves. The northern states were more industrialized and had a lot more education than the southern states, which if you wanted more education, you'd pay for someone to teach you, like a private tutor or someone else like that. While on the other hand, the North had public education, such as how we now have public education in Wake County. So it would make a lot more sense for the southern states to be less represented because of the low education and the low money that was put into the actual education, which wouldn't have been a lot considering it was just a private tutor you would have to get.
On the website 13.org, we got information to our argument that slaves cannot be represented due to their legal responsibility. The legal status for African Americans was non-existent, and the American colonies had started black oppression in the southern states' laws. One such law was the South Carolina Act of 1740, which made it legal to whip and kill rebellious slaves.
So, in conclusion to our entire argument, the slaves of that time should not be represented in government due to their lack of citizenship, the fact they are property, and that the South overall was not very productive in terms of education. And in the South, there was a huge population of slaves, which grew all the tobacco and so forth. But slaves should never be represented because of these reasons, and this is our argument.